Welcome to the RETScreen, a space software showcase for municipalities and real properties, which is being brought to you by LAS in partnership with RETScreen International. At LAS, we are part of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and our mandate is to help municipalities reduce costs, save money, and build capacity. And we do that by the programs that we develop. And when municipalities, they are all turnkey programs. When the municipalities participate in them, sure, they meet those objectives. My name is Christian. I've been working for the organization for the last 7 years. Prior to that, I used to work for a municipality as an energy manager and moved across somewhere there 7 years ago. It's been fun being here and just being able to serve municipalities. My partner in the house is Stephen Dixon. Stephen comes with 4 decades of experience in energy training. He's done this, he's been there, he's done that. And he's truly a resource in the training world. So Stephen, it's great to have you, and certainly, sure, I hand over to you to take over from here.
Thank you, Christian. Appreciate that. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Looks like we got a good group today. It's going to be a fast day, as some of you have already experienced with workshops or seminars, webinars that I do, but I want to try to make it interesting. It is a showcase, so we're going to try to showcase as many of the features and some of the newer features of RETScreen as possible. You reminded me, Christian, about the 4 decades thing, right? It was interesting. I was going to say, and lots of gray hair, but I remember the first job that I had, I actually had to write a piece of software in BASIC on a very old computer to do envelope heat loss analysis. And that's one of the demonstrations I'm going to do today in RETScreen. And it's a whole lot easier today than it was 40 years ago. So, and the same thing with interval data RETScreen can deal with. RETScreen can deal with a whole lot of things. What I like to say about RETScreen, and somebody actually once said this to me, I was working with them the other day, he said, RETScreen is like this whole toolbox. It's everything you need as an energy person in one place. And even if you're not an energy person, it's everything you need to make good decisions around energy. It's available right across the world. I'm sure we have people from, tomorrow here, maybe, if they're from across the international date line. RETScreen is available in 38 languages, covering 2/3 of the world population. And I think at last count, I know, Greg, please forgive me if I get this wrong this morning, but there's somewhere in the order of 800,000 users across the world. So that's pretty incredible, pretty amazing, right? This is a tool that's made in Canada, but it's available the world over. RETScreen has worked with many partners over the years. I first became involved with RETScreen, not as a user, but they approached me as, hey, listen, can you help us develop a couple of models? They've utilized experts, people like myself, an expert in other areas, to actually develop the software. They've worked with partners who provide funding and support in different ways. All of them listed here in Ontario, the one that's quite significant, the Independent Electricity System Operator, but also Natural Resources Canada, obviously, where RETScreen is based, but also NASA. NASA has partnered with the RETScreen to provide a real-time database of weather data, not climate data. Climate data is sort of longer-term averages, but weather data that we can use within our analyses. So, I mean, it's quite the tool. It's quite the tool if you've never seen it before. It involves a number of different types of analyses or functionality. We're going to feature a little bit this morning on the virtual energy analyzer, where you can basically, without even going to a building, you can start off and you say, I want to build a building. I want to see in that building, it's like mine. I want to see what I can do to reduce its energy or maybe reduce its carbon. And eventually, by the end of the webinar, under portfolio analysis, right down there bottom, I'm going to feature for you, show you that you can take those buildings you have in the virtual energy analyzer, we call them archetypes, very typical buildings, and we can build a net zero plan. Now, on Tuesday, there was a webinar, right? We're using the net zero planner. Kevin Burke from RETScreen put it together. When I get to that slide, I'm going to show you the overview, but I'm going to give you the link. You can go to the RETScreen website or actually YouTube channel and play that entire webinar and see how you use that tool in all its glory. So, but what I'm trying to do today is to show you that the big picture. RETScreen can provide benchmarking analysis, and that's certainly important. What I'll feature in terms of benchmarking is many municipalities here in Ontario, for sure, or all of them, have to report using this thing called Portfolio Manager, right, to the provincial government under the EWRB regulation. Well, RETScreen actually has interfaces to Portfolio Manager. And in fact, LAS has a tool called EPT. So I'm going to show you, if you're going to do benchmarking, at the very least, you can go from EPT, where you accumulate your data, to your energy plan, the energy planning tool. You can go to Portfolio Manager to report to the provincial government, and then you can feed that data literally by automated links over to RETScreen and do much more deeper analytics. So it's quite a tool that connects to other things as well. people say, well, is there like, does it have that what if tool? Can I do, what if I change this to that? You know, how much cost, energy, emissions am I going to avoid if I change this to that? We call that feasibility analysis. Change this to that, take a base case, make a proposed case, take the difference, look at the result. I'm going to demonstrate that to you. And I'm going to use a little demonstration this morning that actually came out of a workshop I did years ago. I was talking about RETScreen, and a gentleman in the back of the room was on his phone. You know, the annoying person in the back row was talking on his phone. Anyway, he became the most valuable asset in that day because he said to me, Steve, you're talking about that RETScreen tool. I got the contractor on the line. He wants to know whether they can put an additional 10 inches of, R10, 2 inches of insulation on the roof of our long-term care facility. What answer do I give him? Is there a payback for that? I said, well, let me do that. And I ran that model directly in RETScreen, as I'm going to do this morning, and I'm going to show you how quickly you can get that answer. Making good decisions around energy and carbon and cost. Performance analysis, when you've made those decisions, can you prove the results? And I'm going to demonstrate that to you. Not only that, but also being able to look in much granularity at the performance of your building when it comes to electricity, gas consumption, maybe even water if you have the data. So ultimately, and then we'll end up back at the portfolio. So I'm going to start out at this archetype or virtual energy analyzer. We look at the prototypical or archetypical building, one that's very typical of others. And then we're going to go through some of the functions and come back out at that portfolio. And I'm going to give you 4 reasons by the time we're done to use RETScreen if you're not using it now. And I'm going to give you a 5th reason to try it. You're going to get access to a 30-day license. So if you don't have RETScreen today, you'll be able to get it. And you could download it today, and you could use some of these features today because there is the viewer version. But with that 30-day license, you'll really be able to give it a good test run. All right.
Yeah, that's a great one. I forgot to say, if you have any questions, please pop it in the Q&A in our box, and we will take it as we go.
Cool. Yeah, use the question and answer. My son Adam is on the line. He may pop up at some point, and his voice may pop up with a question. We'll try to deal with the questions as we go. And some of them we may defer on, some of them we may say, listen, can we get back to you afterwards on those ones so we can give you a much fulsome answer. All right. What kind of projects can you deal with in RETScreen? Pretty much anything, all the way from large power plants, including photovoltaics, or even for that matter, a gas turbine, if you were so inclined to do it. You could actually even do, you know, it's interesting. I was doing a webinar on RETScreen. I was saying, hey, there's actually a landfill methane gas model in RETScreen. And somebody said, well, how can you use that? And I said, well, you can, over the number of years that you put waste into your landfill site, you can use it to generate basically a methane curve. And it's funny because the gentleman in the room was saying, hey, like we're fighting right now with a consultant who's trying to tell us that this landfill is not going to give us as much methane at certain times and then more at other times. He said, my calculations and my observations as the engineer at the site is counter what the consultant's saying. And I showed him where RETScreen could do it. He sat there literally in the workshop at lunchtime, and he put in his waste depositions into that waste landfill site. And he came out with a curve, which RETScreen generated, that matched what he was measuring or what he was seeing. He became sold right there. So, I mean, that's a pretty obscure project for some people, but that's the kind of diversity RETScreen has in the projects it can deal with. Transportation, you're looking at electrifying your fleet all the way down to the bottom. You can do that with RETScreen. It has a database of vehicles, right? Older internal combustion engine, electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, they're all in there. And I'm going to go through a number of other things, but I don't need to list all those. Suffice it to say, if you have a challenge in energy, I think RETScreen has the tools to be able to deal with it. If it's not apparent to you, on the very last slide of this deck is an email which says the help desk for today. My promise to you is if you want to know how to do this with RETScreen, send me an email and I will help you to do that. And I will admit readily if RETScreen can't do it, but there's very little that I wouldn't suggest you can do with RETScreen. That's my promise to you to help you to figure out how to do it. And I do that a lot. People actually send me that email. RETScreen has a lot of built-in databases, right? In addition to that, NASA, that external cloud-based database of satellite-derived meteorological data, hour-by-hour temperatures. I use that for analyzing interval. I look at interval data, hourly electricity, hourly gas, hourly temperature, and I analyze buildings in RETScreen, right, in a few clicks. But you can get a lot of other data, product data, equipment, the specifications for the equipment, the cost for that equipment, right? Even things like hydrogeology data or hydrology data. If you have water courses in your municipality, maybe you want to look at the potential for hydropower at those sites. And there's actually resources in there for that. Benchmarking data and actually project data. I'm going to feature that one a little bit. Archetypes, obviously, case studies and templates. Lots of good built-in help. So that complete toolbox. a quick little look here. So I'm not going to dive into any particular project right now. I'm just going to open up RETScreen. That's what it looks like when you open it up. It's going to give you a little bit of a tour of what's available. Right in the center, we call this the workflow wheel, or the workflow. It is basically all the things you can do and how we suggest you use RETScreen in the most fulsome manner. If I was doing an audit today, I'd use RETScreen. If I was developing a net zero plan, I would definitely use RETScreen, right? So it can take me from the beginning, where I'm starting to look at, gauge where I am, and benchmarking, right? It will take me through the smart project identifier. That's basically what the virtual energy analyzer is, but also the feasibility analysis in RETScreen, where I can determine how much energy is being used in my base and my proposed case, but on my costs for my retrofits, come up with my emission savings. A very powerful financial analysis tool, including if you're doing large projects, risk and sensitivity analysis, very powerful. And then eventually, once you've done that project, you've made that intervention. And for me, a project can be anything from awareness with people all the way through to a big project where you retrofit the building, deep retrofit, the low carbon, or maybe put in renewables, or all those things. Then we can actually measure data and do the analysis to report on the results, and continue that continuous improvement process for the sustainability, the persistence, and the energy efficiency of our building. So that's kind of all the bits and pieces there.
Yeah,
RETScreen has.
Yeah, sorry, Steven, there is a question. It says to track energy use intensity over time for a facility. Is RETScreen capable of handling changes in gross floor area?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's right. There is a place where you can go in and you can put in a database of what your areas of your facility is. And when you go through the portfolio analysis reporting tool, you can bring that in. So it will actually divide. So if you've got maybe a campus, which is buildings are growing, or maybe additions to a building over time, yes, you can do that. Absolutely can do that. All right, so across the top, we call this the top menu. And these are all the functions that we can perform. Right now, I set RETScreen up to do everything, but I can tailor it to do just performance, or just benchmarking, or just feasibility. There's lots of standard controls that we have on the left-hand side. There's even lots of settings. I'm going to click into this one because I find this one really valuable. These are things that we can use to set up and customize and tailor RETScreen to our own requirements. So if we don't want to look at, Varen, which is where RETScreen is based, as the default weather station, we can put the default weather station in here. We can build the units and different things. We can build in financial parameters. So for our organization, we have set assumptions around escalation, inflation, discount rate, and so on. Those can all be defaulted in here. And also, it has some neat facility now in this latest version around the price of energy in different places. So the database that we can go in and take a look at the price of energy, electricity, natural gas, the world over, actually. So there's many, many different places. And if you don't like one of the ones that's in here, guess what? You can build your own. So you can build your own database and then use that later on. So you don't have to keep retyping those numbers in as you go by. So very useful. Using the right price in your calculations is important. Using the right carbon factors in your calculations is important. So you can tailor the carbon factors. You can go with the default values, right? Or you can basically build your own database of emission factors for the different fuels and electricities that you're actually using. So out of the box, it works. It's got what you need. You can then dig deeper and tailor it. I worked with one of the, with Greg and Kevin and one of the developers over the years. And the philosophy behind RETScreen is you can work with it today. You can start with it today. You can get an answer and you go, that answer looks promising. Okay, I can dig in now and tweak the numbers. So you don't have to build these databases to begin with. But if you're concerned that they don't match exactly your situation, that's okay. You can dig down, put them in, and your analysis will inherit those new numbers. So it enhances your analysis as you go forward. Get in the ballpark and then focus down on what the real answer is. And the other neat feature I have is its ability not to lose data, right? It'll actually store many versions, so it's like a master rewind in the file. So if you happen to go, an hour ago I had the answer and now I messed it up, but I saved over top of it. No, you didn't, because mine's set to 5 saves. I have 5 versions back, so I can master rewind back over all my mistakes. And if my computer, somebody turns the power off right in the middle of something, RETScreen will come up and say, hey, I found this file you had. So RETScreen's got all those cool features too that help you to be productive, but not lose anything and basically not get frustrated. So going back to the home screen, There's ways to start projects. You can start them on, the basis of benchmarks and feasibility performance. We're eventually going to go into this virtual energy analyzer. And then you have some help tools here, which I'll feature in a second. And here's where we can access the portfolio. And if you're interested in net zero planning and what RETScreen can do, the net zero plan example is a pre-built example. There's that waterfall diagram, or graph, which allows you to see the impact of different measures in your net zero plan. More of that once we get to it, but also in the video I talked about. So, I mean, again, there's so much stuff here. Over here on the right-hand side, I typically use it from the left-hand side, but if you want to go in and jump in particular ways, there's examples of projects over here and all the integrated help features. It's a real cool feature. You can see a video of me on the pumping dialog in RETScreen. What do I mean? Well, you've got help. You can click on the help and it goes, it tells you what you're going to put in that cell on the pumping dialog. Okay, it wants to know the size of the motor, it wants to know the efficiency of the pump. But if you go, I wonder what Steve would do when he's doing this, you can click on the video help and you can see me go take you through that dialogue with this example, right? There's lots of videos on the YouTube website that RETScreen has, but there's many of those embedded, and there's embedded videos on particular parts of the software. So you don't just get text help, you also get that video help as well. I'll kind of point that out as we go through an example a little bit later on. Lots of features, right? Lots of features. There's also these things we call case studies and templates. So I can access this from the main screen. And when I go in there, what I actually see is a whole array or whole list of case studies and templates. I can say, I want to look at one on variable speed drives, right? And then it will bring me up to maybe one that's variable speed drives. And then I'm on a pump or a fan. And then I can click on the template or the case study link, and it shows me a description of the project. And then eventually what it does, I'm just going to turn my phone off here so it doesn't bother me beeping. Maybe people are saying, hey, talk a little slower. Maybe I should. There we go. Okay, so you can then click on the link there and actually open up the solution to this problem. If you're a teacher out there or you want to teach somebody else how to do this, you want to teach yourself how to do this, I think these case studies and templates are dynamite. Case studies are real projects with a real solution to RETScreen. Templates are a hypothetical situation, right, which are actually very instructive too. So lots of help. And not to the least of which, as I mentioned before, if we're looking at a pumping system and, you want to know what they mean by the capacity of the motor, well, you click on the text, which is the field label, and it gives you this little description. It may even show you a picture. It may go a little deeper. Or if you want to say, hey, what would Steve do in this situation? Well, you get to see that. You can click on the e-learning link up here, right? And you'll go to the YouTube channel, RETScreen's YouTube e-learning channel, and you can see about, I think that's a 3 or 4 minute video on how to use that particular function of the software, right? So lots of ways to get help. Not the least of which is the last slide in this deck, which is if you're really stuck, send me an email and I'm more than happy to try to help you. All right, getting started, the virtual energy analyzer. So what if you want to do a building-wide analysis, but you don't really quite have all the data in the building? You want to see how this is going to work, right? Well, RETScreen has a couple of ways you can approach this. One is by facility type. So you can say, give me a complete facility. We're going to look at this in a second, just how easy it is to get in there. Give me a complete facility. Or we can say, give me a particular measure. Maybe I'm thinking of doing something in a building, a particular measure, a particular action I'm going to take. So I can go and search the archetypical database, the virtual energy analyzer, for either a full facility or particular project or measure. So I'm going to do that right now. Before I do that, though, I'm just going to show you what some of these things look like. So when we get in there, it's going to get pretty busy. So I just wanted to be able to show you that there are two things. There is two types of archetypes. There are a 40% energy reduction archetype, and there's also then 80 to 90% emission or carbon reduction archetype. So these archetypes, again, the definition of the word archetype is a very typical building. That's in this case, right? So these buildings are being built by people. I've built a few of them. Many other people have contributed. So people who are experts in those types of buildings have gone in and said, okay, for that kind of building, I think this one is looking at a community center. So all the community centers they've had experience with, bring it all together, meld it down into this archetype, and then build a base case and a proposed case, and build a strategy within that archetype to reduce energy by 40%. So if you want to know how you can reduce energy by 40% in your community center, I would open up this archetype and go in there and have a look at what that archetype does. Now, let's say that archetype is for a building that's a different size than yours. There is a scaling function in here. So you can say, scale my building, right? Maybe your building's smaller, maybe your building's bigger. you can scale it to your situation. Maybe you say, well, I don't have all those rooms in my building. You can remove building rooms, you can add rooms, right? So you can go in, and then once you've got that archetype to begin with, you can start to tailor it to your situation. I kind of liken it to sort of playing energy games, but it's not a game. This is very real stuff, but it gets me there where I don't have to build it from scratch. Eventually, when you look at those enough, you're going to be able to build things from scratch, right? But this is a great starting point. And then if you really want to dig down and get to that 80, 90% reduction in carbon, there is another set of archetypes, right? So when we go in there, we'll see that there's two groups of archetypes. We can pick the one that we want. And in this case, right, this archetype then reduces, this is the emission screen, the RETScreen, where we get to see the green bar is how much we reduce the emissions by. In this case, it's 89.9%. And that is for a curling arena, right? So the building that we were looking at there is a curling arena. I'll try to remember to go into those same ones when I dive in there, just show you how it works. And the result is, well, ultimately carbon and cost, but I'm going to show you those screens when we jump down there. So let's just take a quick little look in the RETScreen here again, watching for questions or anything. Yeah, the slides will be going out. Yeah, for sure.
While you're doing that, there's a couple of questions just so you're aware. Well, we'll probably cover them off, but just so you're aware they're there, about which database RETScreen uses for GHG emissions and how can you perform climate resilience of the assets using the software, and weather normalization. What is the meaning of weather normalization?
How can you do climate resilience? What you could do is you could actually create climate examples or climate data sets, which represents the worst case, the best case. Now, when you talk about climate resilience, is it just temperature? Or the other thing about climate resilience is things like, is your building able to sustain or be resilient to a flood that may occur because of excessive rain in your area? So RETScreen doesn't sort of deal with that side of it, but you can definitely test the sensitivity of your model to extremes in temperatures, right? And as going forward, obviously, a lot of people in the eastern part of Canada, to tell you the truth, never had air conditioning. But part of climate resilience is making sure that people don't live in hot conditions in the summer, adding heat pumps, add air conditioning. But we can also model the impact of that by looking at sort of more extreme temperatures in our climate database as well. So in that sense, yes, you could do that. Any other one there, Adam?
There was one about which database RETScreen is using for GHG emissions. I believe you'll probably get to that once you get to emissions.
Well, yeah, actually, I'm going to ask somebody from RETScreen to pop that up there, because that's a good question. RETScreen does populate those databases, the emission databases, and we will see the factors that I had in there before. But the actual source of them, I don't want to quote the wrong source, how RETScreen populates those. So I'm going to set that question aside and maybe get that answer. Or if somebody from RETScreen's online, they can put that answer in there. But at the end of the day, the built-in databases are just the starting point. If you've got numbers that are different for your location, for whatever reason, you can put those numbers in yourself. So you can enhance or start from scratch with that database. Okay. All right.
Just the last one was about weather normalization.
Absolutely, yeah. When we get into the performance analysis, we can definitely do weather normalization. When we're doing feasibility analysis, we're using basically a climate database, which is essentially for any site on the surface of the Earth that we can click into and tell RETScreen that our building is located at. So over here, I actually do this when I go into the analyzer. I get to pick a location. So we use one of these red, or even there's a few places of these blue weather station or climate data stations. We can use those. And our project will be essentially run at that site. But if we get into performance analysis where we have different weather month over month, day over day, that's where we use the NASA database to generate real-time weather data and normalize for that in statistical methodology. And I'll make a reference to that one as we get into the performance analysis. Okay, so we're back here. How do we access these archetypes? I've talked a lot about them and the value of them, and I just have to click off on my weather database here. There we go. Okay, so how do we start this? Well, we could click on this virtual energy analyzer here on this screen, but I'm going to go back here. I'm going to click on it over here. So the very first screen, top of the getting started options, obviously, is the virtual energy analyzer. So we're going to click into this. Okay, so it says, what do you want to do, Steve? So where do you want to be, right? So, and what kind of building do you want to look at? So I can actually search anywhere in the world, just like any map program. You can do that here. So the kind of building I want to look at, I'm going to go look at a commercial institutional building. So municipal buildings, obviously under the commercial category. And I'm going to go in here. You kind of have to search around sometimes for these things. I can never always remember where these things are. There is a data center building in here. I know that was something somebody asked about the other day. I'm going to go to public building and let's see what I get here. So under public building, which obviously is where I would start for municipality, I have my choice of a number of buildings, okay? So if I'm looking for an archetypical building with a 40% energy reduction, then I have my choice of a curling arena, a hockey and skating arena, a community center, or a convention center, all right? If I'm interested in a deeper retrofit, that 80 to 90% emission reduction, then I'm looking at a curling arena, a community center, and a convention center. So I showed you a little earlier the example, which I think was a, what was one? The community center, 40%, 30 to 40%. So I'm going to pull up this community center to begin with. So I select community center. Now, you might ask, what are these stars up top here? Well, they basically tell us the quality or the wholesomeness of the archetype. Some of them, like for example, if we, before I actually, there was the one for the data center, and you'll notice it's only a two-star archetype because it's just benchmarking. I know that RETScreen is working on that archetype, so it will probably be enhanced with an energy base case, energy proposed case, and eventually costs. So it just tells you how much data is in these archetypes. I always like to work with the 5-star, but there's probably some opportunity to work with the lesser ones too. Now, where's my building? All right, well, so Kristen, you're in London, right? So I think you're in London today, right? So I'm going to put my pin in London. There you go, okay? So basically I'm saying this building is just north of London, okay? There we go on the map, and I'm going to click OK. And what RETScreen is going to do is going to go out there and construct a building, okay? And it's got a fair bit of intelligence here, right? And eventually when we get to the low carbon archetypes, right, and the virtual energy analyzer, it has a lot of intelligence in terms of making some decisions about what this archetypical building is going to look like. My RETScreen's a little slow. For whatever reason, I don't know, but Zoom and RETScreen tend to maybe sometimes compete for my resources. And I have a 5-year-old machine, which doesn't really help matters either. So there we go. So there's all the climate data taken from the climate data station at London Airport, which is the closest point or the closest climate data station to the pin that I put on the map. Now I can go and look at the facility description here. So here we see, all the nice boilerplate stuff put on the front end. We see a picture. If you don't like the pictures in RETScreen, you can put your own pictures in. You can go select image and go grab a picture, right? You can grab a picture of yourself if you wanted to and put it in there. But basically, you can tailor this thing to your own purposes. In fact, in a lot of cases, you have things called notes too. So I could click on this, and let's say that I wanted to actually modify this archetype, and I can describe what I've done to modify this archetype. So I can put my own notes in there as well. I can turn that off if I don't want to see it. I can turn off the, there we go, turn off the image. I can change, there's a lot of cool things, okay? I can look at the benchmark database where these benchmarks came from in RETScreen, right? So I can go in here to the benchmark database and say, okay, where did it get this benchmark for this facility from? So I have access to a pretty extensive database of archetypes, well-researched and well-linked over here on the right-hand side within RETScreen. So this is where these archetypes, the benchmark of 272 kilowatt hours per square meter, or about 28 kilowatt hours per square foot, comes from for this type of facility, a community center. All right, so what does this building actually look like? So let's go dig down here. And what I'm saying is from a physical perspective, right? Well, we can cruise down here. This is the shape of the building that was actually modeled. Kind of looks like a lot of community centers, right? Different, it's not a square box. This is the proposed case that they're modeling. So this is what the building is going to look like after it gets retrofitted. All the equipment they're putting, adjusting schedules, building envelope, ventilation, lights, electrical, lots of measures, all the way down to putting a solar water heater in and putting a photovoltaic system in as well. All right, let's have a look at where some of those things might be. Well, when you look at RETScreen, it's a bit busy, okay? I mean, the first time you look at it, you're probably going to feel overwhelmed. First time you look at it and you don't have any data, you're going to go, well, what do I do? But that's where I go into the archetypes and pick a small archetype. If you do the first time, you know what? Pick a house, right? Or pick a very small building because you'll have less things in there. I picked the community center. It's probably medium. Some of them are very long, but some of them are very short. So pick one that's easy, kind of get your mind around what's in there. But you'll ease into it, and I think you'll warm up to it pretty quickly. Right?
Can you pick your own house, Steven?
Well, I can't pick my own house, but I could build my own house. And the project, I always tell people, dude, if you're live in a house, many people don't today, but if you're privileged enough to live in a house, get your electricity, get your gas bills, right? Figure out how much energy you use in the year, right? And you can actually enter them in here, right? You can stick in your electricity and gas bills, your historical consumption, and then RETScreen, as you build the model for your house, RETScreen will accumulate the values, and when you get within 10%, that's pretty good. You're modeling your building maybe 5 to 10%, right? So you could I would suggest if you're going to try to do a whole building model in RETScreen, if you live in a house, try it on your house. If you're know of a small building, just a small building, 5,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet, try it on that, right? Don't try to model a massive building to begin with because it will overwhelm you. But once you've figured out how to do it, you can then scale it. RETScreen operates on scale. The other thing about RETScreen, a lot of people ask me about is, Steve, well, where's the interzone transfers of energy? RETScreen is not an hourly simulation, and there's a real virtue in that, right? Because I don't have to gather a lot of information. RETScreen accounts for all the energy flows into and outside of a building, right? And that makes it easier for you. It requires less data. And for many, many purposes, not every purpose, but for many, many purposes, that's all you need to do, right? So don't take RETScreen for what it's not. Don't overthink what RETScreen is doing. But when you think about it, what it really is doing, go, well, that's useful, okay? And if you ask me about RETScreen and I tell you it can't do something, I'll be honest with you. There are certain things I wouldn't use it for, but there's a lot of things that I would. All right, so let's just have a look here. We were back on our what we call our include screen, where we get to see, sorry, click on the wrong thing, where we get to see everything in the building, right? I can say this is the fuel saved right now. These are all the projects that are in here, right? All these projects combined have a payback of 3 years, right? RETScreen tells me that right away. Let's say I want a quicker payback, and I look down the list here. There's some things with long payback, right? Meeting room lighting. I'm going to turn that off because that has a longer payback, right? So now my payback drops by 0.1. Is it worth doing that? No, let's leave it in there. Let's get all that lighting retrofit done. But you can tune the package of projects that you have in here, right? And as you do that, then you'll also tune, right? Or you'll arrive at a reduction in carbon. Now, this one actually says it's a 40 to 50% energy reduction, but it's actually a 62% reduction in carbon just because of the mix of fuels. And we have a beautiful financial model, right? We do a level 2 financial analysis, which is really basically life cycle costing in a nutshell, right? We put out money, we had the cash flow graph coming back here, right? We see our basically a return on the investment, which happens relatively quickly here. We can also model financing in here. We can go in here and say, let's borrow some money, right? Let's borrow some money to do this project at a certain interest rate. Hey, use other people's money to do energy efficiency. Wow. When you look at the returns and energy efficiencies, right, the internal rates of return are in the 20, 30, 40, 50% range. That's way higher than your interest rate, right? Or your discount rate that you would be using. Ultimately, it was a financial person that once said to me in a workshop I was doing with municipalities, you could actually borrow money in your credit card and still do an energy project in a realistic way. If your credit card was big enough, yes. But that's the point. Returns on energy projects you can demonstrate in RETScreen are good enough to do that. And then I mentioned that risk analyzer, it's all here. There's also a report writer. You click in here, you get a predefined report that you can go and print as well. And again, if you're building your own model, you get to do this exactly like you're building. Now, what I aren't going to show you right now, but there is a custom report generator here, or custom dashboard generator, where you can take anything on a RETScreen and put it on there. It's all dynamic and it prints. I might have a chance to show you that when we get to the portfolio. There's a wonderful portfolio using the custom dashboard. It's a great kiosk tool to display on. You can put it in the lobby of a building. You walk into your admin building, right? And City Hall, and you see all the things going on, right? The RETScreen is managing for you on that monitor. Great way to use RETScreen. Okay, so I'm kind of digressing a little bit, but what I was trying to show you was this 30 to 40% energy reduction archetype. I'm just going to jump into a particular case. I'm going to look into, okay, how do you model the heating system? Well, in this case, we're not changing the heating system, but we have to have one in the base in the proposed case. Now, there's the video learning. I can click on that, and I don't think it would be me on this one. It might be. Yeah, it probably is, actually. There's other people in there, but basically you get to see somebody talking about this particular dialog box. Now, maybe you've got more than one fuel in a building, so you can actually deal with that. Maybe you can assign, maybe you're dealing with a heat pump. I've got a slide later on where we show you, 70% of the load is carried by the heat pump, 30% by your peaking conventional natural gas heating system, right? You can get 90% reduction in energy and carbon, right? But basically, you can hybridize it. So RETScreen has the ability to build a hybrid system and allow you to model those multiple fuels as well. If we were changing the boiler to a heat pump, this is where we do it. And I'll show you that view later on. Actually, I'm going to show you that view right now, because what we're going to do is we're going to jump over and we're going to have a look at it. I do have a couple little demonstrations saved for you, so I'm not going to dive into it now. One of them is the building envelope. The building envelope is a cool tool, right? Built by folks at Intermodal Engineering. I guess some of them now are with WSP. Great resource. It allows you to very quickly build a building. You can have multiple building envelopes. So you can model some very complex buildings in this thing. Very good. You can also model thermal penetration of, where you've got a slab edge going out through the insulation. There's some really neat features in here. I mean, we could spend all day just in this model. But again, have a look at these things. I'll show you one example of using this in a few minutes. All right. So let's go take a look at another archetype. So this time it's going to go up to File, going to click on Virtual Energy Analyzer. Now it already knows where I am, so it remembers that. But now what I want to do is pick up the deep archetype, the deep carbon reduction. I'm going to go to arena curling, 80 to 90%. So we're really going to town here now. Okay. So I click on that. So you can see, it's pretty easy to do this. You can tour around this thing, right? Now, RETScreen's also really good at avoiding you losing data unless you answer the question improperly. So I don't care what I was changed in there before, but I might, and I need to answer this question properly. But at this point, I'm going to say, no, I don't wish to save my changes. So it's going to dump those, bring the new ones in. It'll take a second to construct the archetype, look at the location, do all the things that make this archetype relevant. So this case, it's actually probably making some decisions around whether we stick with a natural gas system, whether we get electric heat, whether air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps. So it's actually making a bunch of sophisticated decisions. And you go, where did I learn about what those decisions are, Steve? I'll show you that in a second. All right. So basically the same screen that we saw before. This doesn't look a lot different. But when we get to energy, we're going to see probably it's going to look very similar, right? Less on the lighting side here. But now if we go down the bottom here, we've got things like heat recovery on the refrigeration system and the curling rink, and we've got a photovoltaic system covering 38% of the roof, right? So cool. So this thing is, well, let's just prove that this is an emission. Look at that, 90%, 89.9% emission reductions, right? And there's a financial case here actually for this. If we look at this, well, maybe not. Okay, that's the thing we have to realize, and that's the thing that RETScreen can help you to do. That trying to get a simple payback out of a 90% reduction in carbon is going to be difficult, but we have to look over the life cycle of building. Christian, we've done some great workshops on this. You've done some fire hall work down in
Middlesex Center,
where we looked at over 30 years, and we looked at, we didn't look for the simple payback. We said, which over 30 years of the life of this building, considering all things, and you can do this in RETScreen too, is going to be the least cost option. It turns out that the low carbon approach is the least cost option, but you have to consider things like recurring costs over time, periodic costs. In the financial model in RETScreen, in the costing model, I'll just show you this very quickly. We haven't used it here, but we can go into, this is very basic costing, right? Then we go into a much more detailed costing when it comes up, where we get to talk about lots of different things. And down here we have periodic costs. So we can add costs in over time, in the 5th year, the 8th year, whatever, to retrofit this building, so we can deal with those maintenance costs. We can deal with it's not just a matter of the capital cost up front and maybe an annual O&M cost and then the savings. It's a matter of actually dealing with a lot more of the detail. And again, RETScreen has this in here. And let's see what's under the level 3 analysis. It might even have a little bit of a design or costing for the ground source heat pump if they use one here. So no, it doesn't, but it could be in there. So the neat thing about these archetypes too, if you look at them, you can look at the financial analysis on what we call level 1, or the costing on a level 1 basis. Very simple. Or we can go to level 2, level 3. So dig down onto these things. There's a lot more detail in them as well. All right, let's go back and have a look at this. I'm going to go back to the space heating system. Before we just looked at, didn't change. In this case, it did change, right? What do we do here? Well, we're going to deal with multiple fuels. So we've gone from a natural gas-fired system to a heat pump, right, running on electricity. And looking at the COP here, I would say that's probably an air source heat pump with a 220% seasonal efficiency, which is equivalent to a COP of 2.2. And it's taking 70% of the energy, whereas 30% is provided by that conventional boiler. So there we have a hybrid system, right? So these archetypes are really rich. Now you go, Steve, like, okay, so what's all the detail in behind this? Well, here's where you're going to find that out. We go to our include screen, right, which is where we get to see all the results. And I'm not even scratching the surface here. We go down the bottom here, read this in detail. I'm not going to go through it right now, but this is where we see the intelligence of the virtual energy analyzer really emerging, right? Because in here, when you ask it to build one of these things, it goes through and makes decisions, right, based on your location and the fuels and so on, about what is the best combination of pieces. So this isn't just somebody's built this and brings it out on the screen. This is, it looks at your location, it looks at the weather, and it says, what is the best system to go in this situation? Starting with the natural gas, the electric boiler, air source heat pump, ground source heat pump. And then even it looks at basically the use of PV or offsite renewables as well, right? So it comes up with a combination of interventions, which is going to get you to that 90%. It's not just somebody built a 90% archetype. So have a look at it. It's really valuable. And eventually when we get to the net zero planner, this comes into play because the same logic is applied and we can build it into an entire portfolio of buildings. All right. All right, so the last thing I wanted to show you was if we're going to the virtual energy analyzer, maybe we won't look at a facility, maybe we just want to look at one project, right? So I'm going to click into individual measure here. I should be able to find right here. There we go. Okay, mouse doesn't always work well on Friday morning. Okay, so here's all the individual measures we can look at. Whoa, look at this, right? We can go in here and we can say, I want to do an individual measure on pumps. Okay, there we go. And maybe it's a circulating pump on my chill water or my heating water, a variable speed pump, or maybe it's, could be a water, domestic water pressure booster pump. Maybe it's just replacing the pump with a more efficient pump, right? So there's lots of different variations of modifying a pumping system to be more efficient. All right, so there we go. Now, this may or may not require weather data or climate data. If it's a building envelope, it would, but here I'm just going to click it anyway, and it's going to use that location that I had. No, I don't want to save the changes. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So the point about this virtual energy analyzer thing is that there's so many pieces in here. You don't have to go in and start to build. Once you bring up a building, you can use it to inspire you. Maybe you just take it and say, listen, we got 5 or 6 buildings in our portfolio look very similar to these ones. This is the strategy they took in this virtual energy analysis, these archetypes, and eventually in the net zero planner. And we can tweak some of those things. This is what it would take to get to 90% carbon reduction in these buildings. So, and maybe your colleagues in your municipality go, wow, that's good. I mean, you can hire a consultant to do this eventually, right? But you can go a long way with a tool like this to really explore what could be done and what the financial results are going to be, right? And even looking at the risk and sensitivity piece as well. So really seriously consider a tool like this, if you're going down this road, and I think most of us are going down the road. I know Adam, my son's online, who talked a little bit earlier. We're both, looking at when are we going to change our heating systems to the heat pumps, and kind of doing the dance here a little bit, which most people are doing. But we're using RETScreen all the time to do that analysis to know when the right time to do it is and what the benefits are going to be. All right, so I picked up a particular example now of a project. There we go, little pump project, right? Putting a variable speed drive in a pump. And RETScreen is going to look a lot simpler here, right? There's my archetype. There's my pump, right? 1.2-year simple payback without incentives. Well, that's probably not unusual. It's funny, on a community center, I walked into a community center a little while, well, you were with me, Christian, 4 or 5 years ago, and I said, I joke about, show me your least reliable pump, and I'll probably show you a way to improve efficiency. And it's funny because the operator of the building said, well, we got this pump down in our pool room that has to be rebuilt every 3 years. So we went down there to have a look at it, and this gentleman really wasn't a believer in this energy thing to begin with. You remember that, Christian, right? He was pretty skeptical.
Yeah.
He was pretty skeptical. We got down there, and I looked at the pump, and there was this massive valve on the discharge of the pump. It was the main pool circulating water, and they were using a valve to control the flow. They'd thrown it off its curve, and they destroyed the efficiency, and they destroyed the pump because that causes a lot of problems with the pump when you throttle a pump like that, right? This is a perfect example of the same kind of project, maybe not as big, but I can jump in here and I can go through and I can say, okay, this is my pump. Now, RETScreen is actually multilingual, more than just in the spoken word, but also in terms of the unit. So I can actually go with metric or imperial units. So a 2.2 kilowatt motor in Europe is actually a 3 horsepower motor in this country. RETScreen can mix and match units. If you get hung up on units, don't worry, RETScreen's got the solutions for that. So I can go through and look at, if I put, going from a constant speed pump that's being throttled to a variable speed pump in what we call the high flow range, above 50% most of the time, 53% reduction. But maybe we're heavily throttling this pump. Maybe we're running at the low end, and if we go to low, now we're going to get savings of like 75%. So in a few clicks, you can explore the feasibility of some of these projects. You go, okay, I'm convinced, like the gentleman was in that community center, let's go in here and actually get a bit of information for our pump. And now we can build a business case for our pump, like within a few clicks. Honestly, I really, truly believe that. You know, you can go, you got your cost information in here. Oh, what if I don't know, what some of these things might cost, right? So maybe I'm going to go to a more efficient motor. So I have a product database that I can use here. I can go in here, I can dig in, right? And it can tell me a lot about the specifications of these particular devices. Or maybe I need to know the cost of doing some of these things. So I'm going to go to the cost database, right? And here I see, right, the cost of different kinds of pumps installed in different situations. So there's a lot of depth right behind these things. So that little shopping bag, right? That's actually, this is the product database, and this $sign, that's the cost database that we can use. All right. So,
Stephen,
all right.
how relevant is this costing based on the fact that prices have really shot through the roof after COVID?
Well, that's a good point, right? But you can actually adjust this because when you go to the cost database, it shows you the basis for the costing, right? But if you go in here and click this button here, and you can basically, oh, sorry, that's the current one, user defined. You can set your own factors. So you can put in your own adjustment factors, cumulative inflation rates, even, so these are correct as of January 2022. But if you want to bring those to January 2024, you can go in and put the inflation rates that might apply. So you can adjust these costs to your circumstance. And if you're in a different country, obviously not everybody's Canada, you can also put in the exchange rate in there as well. So it is adjustable. It recognizes that things do change.
Right, that's good.
All right. And then eventually, even out of a single project, we get a carbon reduction. This is just on that project. And we get our financial case, which has, look at this, 377% internal rate of return. How many people have an RSP that is delivering a retirement savings portfolio that's delivering, 300, even a modified internal rate of return is 31%. I can't get anywhere near that. Energy efficiency is a great investment. And RETScreen Expert is a wonderful way to demonstrate the virtue of those investments, the value of those investments to organization. Okay.
Well, while you're on the emissions and finance tab, there's a question about how to handle the increasing cost of the federal carbon tax.
That's a good one. So there's a number of ways you could do that, right? Because you could actually put in here a price, right, for carbon, okay, or a credit rate. Or the other way to do it would be to inflate your energy prices. So if you have natural gas inflating because of the carbon tax, I've actually done it both ways. Actually, what we should do is send out an example. Maybe we'll put together an example of how you would do that, and we can make that available to folks.
I guess while we're there was just one other question maybe answered live here is about replacing 4 boilers with 2 heat pumps and multiple unit ventilators. How would you do that in RETScreen?
So
is it possible?
Yeah, you could do that. So basically you go over, and I don't actually have it in this one, replacing 4 boilers with 2 heat pumps. So first of all, if all the boilers are the same, you don't have to have 4 boilers identified, because RETScreen is going from basically what you would do in RETScreen. Let me just I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to go boiler. Okay. So basically, let's say I had 4 boilers. Okay. And the seasonal efficiency of that combined boiler plant is, 78%. Okay. We're going to be optimistic here, right? And you were going to replace that with heat pumps. So I could go over here and I could click heat pump. Okay. And the heat pump is going to be running on electricity. And let's say I'm going to go with an air source heat pump, right? So I'm going to be looking at maybe a seasonal efficiency of 200%, COP of 2. So there, I've done it right there. Okay, that's it. Now you have to have a heating load on this building, right? Because right now this building doesn't have a heating load. But there are ways to do that. Now there's another way to do this as well, because there is a tool in RETScreen. Go to the facility here. You can actually go to what's called the combined, the heating cooling power model. I'm going to go back to this one. Here we go. It's always off the screen. There we go. Power heating cooling. Okay, this model is very powerful if you're looking at heat pumps. If you're looking at even preliminary sizing a heat pump, right? I'm not going to pick combined heating, cooling. I'm going to pick combined heating and cooling. And then when I go into my energy model, okay, what I'm going to see is a heat pump configuration. And now I go to the heating load screen where I can put in my gas boiler. So let's say I'm heating, 1,000 square meters, 10,000 square feet. I'm going a bit off of the program here, but hopefully this will be valuable to people. There's my 78% efficiency. I can put in my heating load, say I'm going to say 60 watts per square meter, and it's going to calculate for me the fuel consumption of my building. I can calibrate this to my fuel consumption of my building. Once I've done that to my satisfaction, RETScreen now is going to calculate for me the heating load for that building, right? There it is, the heating load for that building. And it's going to tell me the heating load is 60 kilowatts. I can use that information then, and I go to my heating equipment. And if I want to size the heat pump, right, for 60 kilowatts of heating load. Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily the optimal system. It's got an efficiency of 200%. Then what RETScreen will do is now show me, hopefully if I go to my system characteristics screen, that I've basically, I've taken all the load to the heat pump and all the economics flow from that one. Now, let's say that I want to undersize that heat pump a little bit because I don't want to take all the load on. This actually should be electricity. So let's say I want to undersize the heat pump. I'm going to go to 30. So I'm going to make it half the load. Now, remember, that extra 30 kilowatts of load is not for a long period of time. So let's have a look at what that does to how much of the conventional fuel I'm going to displace. So in this case, right, the heating delivered is 90%. So 50% of the size gives me 90% of the displacement of energy. It tells me, it's warning me I need a peak load system. So I'm going to say, okay, I'll put the peak load system in here. I'm going to go with natural gas, and I'm going to leave the system I had there before at 60 kilowatts. Okay, so now the natural gas will provide, most of the capacity on those peak times, but still the heat pump's providing 90% of the energy, which means 90% of the carbon, basically overall, right? Depending on the amount of carbon in your electricity grid. Here in Ontario, it's very low, or in BC and other provinces. If it's higher, then it would be higher. But you can set that. When you go in, you can pick your location, and when you pick your location, the emission factors are naturally picked for you. So I could shift this thing over to, say, a province where maybe the emission factors weren't so low. Let's see if I can pick one up here like Nova Scotia, right? When I do that in Nova Scotia, that's going to have a different impact. Why? Because the electricity grid has a lot of carbon in it, right? At this point, that's changing, but at this point it does. So again, I can play with where this is, and it takes into account the electricity in the grid, the carbon in the grid, the carbon in my fuel. Hopefully that answers that question. That actually eliminates a couple of slides later on. So thank you for that question. Now I do have to keep going. Well, many roads to travel. But again, I think you can see, and there is an archetype around that, right? You can go in there, you've got the low carbon archetype, because that actually does the same thing. And I showed you that before, where you've got the hybrid system, right? You got the natural gas and the electricity together. That was in the real properties model, but I love that little heating, cooling model that I just showed you, right? If you haven't seen that, if you're a longtime user of RETScreen, a lot of people haven't seen one, have a look at it. It's a great tool for starting to get a rough idea of how big a heat pump I might need. It's got a neat sizing algorithm in there. I know somebody's going to say, Steve, where's all the documentation behind how that thing figures out the size of your heat pump? Engineering e-textbook. Oh, look at the depth of knowledge we have here. Combined heat and power cooling, right there it is. And if you dig in here, there's the one, it actually calculates calculating the peak heating load right there. There's a whole dissertation on doing this. And if you love the engineering details, they're all here. They're all here, right? This is how RETScreen figures out your heating load just from your bill and your watts per square meter, right? So there you go. RETScreen, a capable tool. All right. I'm getting pretty excited here. I better keep back on the program, right? So I love this tool. I love this tool. Okay. Let's go back now. Oh, go ahead there.
We still have a long way to go, so
we do. That's fine. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you a bit more of the feasibility analysis. It's kind of not a repeat, but it just sort of maybe opens up a few more things with some slides. So, LAS have a great lighting program, but maybe before you go there, you may want to just see what it looks like, or maybe you go, I'm going to do it myself, right? RETScreen has the tools to allow you to do that lighting retrofit analysis, right? It's all in there. There as product databases, it'll actually help you to figure out what lighting levels you want, what the characteristics of the different light sources are. You're going from metal halide in that ring to the LEDs. Most rings have done this. If you haven't, maybe you want to do it. It's funny because I was in a rink last weekend for one of my granddaughter's hockey tournament, and there was two rinks in this arena. One of them had the old lighting system, one of them had the new. Oh, the difference between the old system and the new was incredible. And I think it really affected the play on the ice surface as well. Schedules and temperatures. Maybe you simply want to look at changing the schedules and updating your schedules in your building automation. Honestly, we do a lot of treasure hunts, colleagues do a lot of EBCX. Scheduling is still one of the biggest opportunities in there, getting the temperatures right, right? Maybe we want to look at our HVAC systems in a little more detail. Maybe we've got leaky dampers. Maybe we can implement heat recovery on some of those systems. The ventilation model in RETScreen does give you all the tools you need to do those calculations, right? You know, I'll be honest with you. The calculations that are behind this one are CFM delta T 1.08. There's probably engineers on the line. You all know what I'm talking about. It means the flow times the delta T times some constant is the amount of, you know, heat, the heat flow that's involved with ventilation air. That's really the only calculation behind this one, but it's all the little details around, you know, what's the schedule? Are we heating and cooling that air? What's the heat recovery? All those things. That's all built in there, right? But the calculation behind this is actually relatively simple, right? I learned years ago there was 3 magic formulas in energy, and on the thermal side of it, it was MC delta T, that's the heating or cooling of water, CFM delta T 1.08, that's the heat and cooling of air, and UA delta T, that's the heat transmission. U is the conductivity of the wall area, delta T, right? If you know those 3 formulas, you can figure out how much heat is coming into and going out of a building in many cases, right? You need a solar thing on top of that, but you know, and that's what RETScreen does. Is it takes those things and puts those formulas at, you know, at your fingertips, literally, or at your mouse tips. All right. I was going to do this one, but I think it's a little bit long in the day to do this one now. But this was the one where the gentleman said to me, Steve, the contractor is asking me whether it's worth putting some more insulation on my building, or they were re-roofing. He said I can do R10, or sorry, R20 versus R10. He wanted to charge the guy $1.20 a square foot. Well, is it worthwhile? So I took prices today, 14 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity, because that's cooling, and you're going to save on that, and 40 cents a cubic meter for natural gas. All right, so I did the analysis. 8.6-year payback. Well, you know, $1.20 seems a little steep, no doubt, but you know what? 8.6 years, that roof's going to be there for 20 years. Okay, I'd probably do it. But you know what I said to the guy? And I said, let's put the price in at 80 cents a square foot. And then the payback was down around 6 years, right, in that situation. He called the contractor back. He said, we'll do it, but I want to pay 80 cents a square foot. The guy went for it. I mean, he had all the insulation right there, right? So it's like, but being able to make that kind of decision on the fly, and then to know that you've also reduced your carbon by 5 tons too, right? Boom, done. All right. Hey, the heat pump calculation you were just talking about, there you go. There's an example. This is actually a rooftop unit using gas, not boilers, going to an air source heat pump. But again, RETScreen has the tools. I just showed those, so we don't need to go into detail here. We can either use what we call the real properties tool to look at the energy side of it, figure out how much energy goes through the heat pump, how much through the existing natural gas system, or we use the power heating cooling model to properly size up that heat pump and maybe build the hybrid system, which is optimal, right? Getting the carbon reduction we want at a reasonable capital cost, right? So tools are all there. I took a look at the pumping example earlier. Well, all of the characteristics of pump, some fans that I have here on the screen are actually embodied in those models, right? So you can model a situation where you go from an inlet guide vane on a fan to a variable speed drive, or maybe you go from that outlet throttling on that massive pool circulating pump I was talking about, the community center, over to speed control, improve the reliability of the pump, and get some really dramatic savings. Again, that was a dial like I showed you before on the pump side. Here's the one in the fan. Same thing, but it deals with all the characteristics of fans that are a little different than pumps. Similar, but different. So in a nutshell, right, feasibility analysis, which can begin from your archetypes, right? Think about that. Don't have to build this yourself. You can begin with your archetypes. You can find your building. You can play with it. You can tweak it, and you can come to a conclusion. Then you can build your own model, right? You build your base case model. You build all your measures. You go in there, pick the ones you want from the archetypes, or build your own, right? Build out your base case opportunities, get your carbon reduction for the configuration you selected, get your business case, take into account financing. So many things. And also you could build in the carbon tax in there, or a shadow price for carbon, or however you wanted to deal with the fact that carbon is getting more expensive, right? Or you could build it into your inflation rate for your fuels as well. Okay, so we've done all these things. Well, the one thing that I would put between here and another workshop is what I call the one-page proposal. If you haven't heard of the one-page proposal, it's a book. Go out and get it. Because if you come up with all this great stuff, now you got to communicate this to somebody else. You got to convince them to let you do the project. Hey, Greg, we need a one-page proposal module in RETScreen. But anyway, I have this one-page proposal that I use. It's great. 7 sections, makes a one-page compelling argument, has the financials, but it talks about, rather than energy more so, it talks about what's important to the person making the decision. So for that gentleman in that pump in that community center, he didn't care about energy really. I mean, he did and he didn't, right? But he really cared about the fact that it was costing him a pump rebuild every 3 years. So how I would pitch that to that person would be, avoid your pump seal replacements. Put in this drive, right? It's that simple, right? So get to what's important. Now, somebody makes the decision to do something. A one-page proposal is a great way to get a decision. What do we do to show the savings? What's what we call performance analysis.
Just
and really,
before you move on to performance analysis, maybe just clear up a few of the questions in the chat.
Sure.
There's just, I think the only one relating to kind of feasibility is if you can do embodied carbon analysis in RETScreen. No, that's it. And then it's more probably a question more for Greg or Christian, is about how many municipalities use RETScreen. So.
That's a good question. I can't answer.
That's a very good question. Also, I haven't done the audit to find out how many of them, but I know there are a couple of municipalities that are using it, because way back then we did training for municipalities, regional location trainings as to how to use RETScreen, and a couple of them sign up for those trainings. So I assume they are using it, but it will be difficult to tell in terms of numbers how many are using it. But having said that, if you're a municipality in Ontario or you're a public sector organization in Ontario and you want a detailed, I mean, this is just drinking from the housepipe, but if you want a detailed 1 day, food training or half day, sure, you can contact me. We can arrange with you that Stephen or Adam can come to your site and we cater for such trainings. I will leave a link in the chat and just to see our course energy training course catalog and as well, which includes a RETScreen as well. So yeah, just give me a call and we can certainly arrange. I know we've touched on a lot today within a short space of time.
And so, we got more to go.
And we got more to go. So
and a couple of questions about the video, like the link. We're going to provide a video afterwards too, right? Well, we can't not do that, right? Because people need to go back and replay it, see some of these things a little slower. So that there will be a video distributed, right? So. And the slides too, for that matter, and the free, the 30-day trial license too. Okay, thank you, Greg, for the answer on the emissions questions. That's great. Folks who were looking for where the sources of the emissions data, Greg has posted that. Greg is the director over at RETScreen. Great guy, known him for many years. He's really the brainchild behind this whole thing. It was his dream to begin with, and it's certainly coming to fruition. All right, so. Performance analysis. I like to say it's statistical process control applied to energy, but really it's, somebody once said to me, Steve, I've never seen somebody can squeeze so much information out of so little data. You can give me just monthly data for a building. I can tell you so much about that building by using this kind of performance analysis, right? It uses regression. It uses time series analysis, which is where you'll simply look at the time series graph. We can do some simple statistics, y equals mx plus b, or energy as a function of weather. And we can run a thing called the Q-sum, which is really the trajectory of the building. The Q-sum goes up, the building's getting worse. The Q-sum goes down, the building's getting better. If it's flat, it's holding the line, right? So it's a great tool for being able to track ongoing the performance of buildings. And this goes beyond what portfolio managers can do. Let me make that point very clear. Portfolio manager is a great tool for doing benchmarking, comparing to the database, comparing to other people that you might know, sharing your data. But eventually, you're going to want to know what's going on in that building on a much more granular level, monthly, daily, hourly. Portfolio manager can't do that, but you can take your monthly data from portfolio manager and you can bring it into RETScreen, and I'll show you the link in a few minutes, and basically analyze it. So again, if you're reporting in Ontario under EWRB, you can use EPT today, the energy planning tool from LAS. You can take your data to portfolio manager. You can do the appropriate reporting. Then you can basically link your data over to RETScreen and do the more granular analysis, the measurement verification you might have to do for some of these projects for incentives, or just to prove to council you did what you set out to do. There's an example right there, right? An example where a boiler, that's a Q-sum curve, that where a boiler was retrofitted with a heat recovery unit, but they made a mistake. So that thing's going, horizontal. That's the baseline. It heads downwards when they made the improvement. It goes horizontal because when they serviced that heat recovery equipment a year in, they forgot to put it back into service until somebody noticed a little bit later, and then they got back on the downslope. So downslope is good. Horizontal is back to the baseline, and we can catch things like that. And it took them 3 months to catch it here. If they had been doing that weekly, they could have saved. I think it was like $40,000, right? It was huge savings, right? What can go wrong? Lots of things can go wrong. You know, you can do the improvements, but things can go wrong. You need to be able to track these things. Here's an example of an office building. They didn't even know what they'd done. They approached me, or actually we approached them because they wanted to be part of a webinar we were doing. And I said, well, send me 4 or 5 years of their electricity and their natural gas data. When I analyzed it, I realized that they'd made huge improvements. I think it was overall about a 35% reduction in energy. Then I said to them, well, I find all these events on my QSUM curve, right? These are all generated with RETScreen, right? I find all these events. What are they? Well, we had a conversation. I walked around the building, took some pictures. Now, RETScreen doesn't overlay the pictures on the graph, but there's a good idea actually to do that. But RETScreen actually allows you to overlay events on the graph. So I can actually put the events that led to the downturns in energy, right? Meaning improvements. So it's a great way to document. You know, wouldn't that be amazing to put in front of council? This is what we've done in our building, right? Look what we've done, right? And it's very visual. I once had a chief financial officer, not of a municipality, but other organization, look at that QSUM and say, that's an indisputable visual of the results. When the CFO says that's an indisputable visual, good things happen. They offered the person, the technical person, the facility manager, another $300,000 for projects, right? What's the best way to get money to do more projects? Demonstrate the virtue of what you've already done. RETScreen can do that very easily, tracking all those things. Greg, we need to have some pictures in there. Just think of. Anyway, so RETScreen Experts Performance Tools starts from that main screen. You accumulate data, which could come from each BT, or you can go directly from Energy Planning Tool into RETScreen. You can go from your bills via green button into RETScreen. You can go from Portfolio Manager into RETScreen. You do your statistical analysis where you do that Y equals MX plus B. You generate that QSUM line. This is, in this case, this is a lighting retrofit that saved energy, right? 100,000 kilowatt hours a year. So, you know, 3 or 4 steps. I know I make it look easy. I know it's not necessarily that easy for the first-time user. There is a video on this one. Actually, if you go into performance analysis in RETScreen, there's a video. There's actually a series of 15 videos that go through that step by step. Have a look at it. It's not that difficult. If you spend a bit of time with it, and maybe you're not the person that's going to do it. Maybe you got to, I'm going to hire a co-op student to come in here and do this, right? They love to do stuff like this. They've got all the skills, right? Anybody that's done a basic course in statistics should have no problem working with this tool. There's a great way to do performance. And you know what? This is a good place to start too, because maybe you've done things in your buildings, but you've not been able to show it, right? If you start doing this and demonstrate what you've done, that's a great way to kickstart things and build momentum in your program as well. RETScreen has the ability to interface to other sources of data. This is an example of my own house, right? There's a company here in Kitchener. I live in St. Jacobs called Hydro, right? They make a real-time monitoring device for electricity. It's flipped on my service entrance. My son Adam, who's been on the line there, he's got another one. We can actually look at the real-time profile on a minute-by-minute basis of our house, right? And then on an hourly basis, I can correlate that to temperature. Where does that temperature come from? From the device in my house? No, it comes from the NASA satellite database. I can bring that all together in RETScreen. Every time I open up RETScreen, it says, hey, do you want to update the data? Yeah, I do. Then I get to look at the new graphs. RETScreen has connectors to many other things. That's the Hydro one, you know, the Schneider metering. If you've got data in generic databases, you can pull it from that. Some of the other major players in terms of energy tracking and data management. This is just a sample of what's available today. The latest version has a lot more, right? So great ways to get data into RETScreen. Great ways to visualize data. I love the weekly time series plot, right? Overlaying temperatures. I also love the heat map because it allows me to see a year. That's a year. All I did was take interval data that I got from utility via green button, dropped it into RETScreen, plotted a weekly plot, and then I plotted the heat map, right? Then I can see the highest, the lowest times. I can zoom in on the weeks that I want to look at. Every band across here is 1 week. Every pixel within the band is 15 minutes, right? 52 weeks in the year and 700 or whatever, 50-minute intervals in the month. Boom. Bob's your uncle. 1 year in a nutshell. A diagnostic tool to go in and look at how that building starts up. We've used this in a lot of facilities. There's always an opportunity. If you've never looked at a demand profile before, and RETScreen makes it very easy to look at demand profiles. My experience is I did my first demand profile in 1983. How did I do it? I took a camera, right? I was a photography hobby. That was my hobby. I took a time-lapse picture of the old thermal demand meter, the mechanical meters. Overnight, I developed the pictures, printed them out, took the readings off the film, and generated a profile. 1983. Today, it's so easy. and it's still as valuable, right? Get a demand profile, analyze your building, you'll find opportunities. We found cycling compressors in buildings. Look at the cycling of that compressor, right? It's not good. That's not good for the compressor, and it's not good for energy. We've seen heating and cooling systems. This is a building that went into set up mode. This is a summer day. So at the end of the day, they set the temperatures up, meaning they went from, say, 22 as a set point to 27 to allow the cooling system to back off. Well, the heating system kicked in to raise the temperature to 27. So you see this huge demand spike, right? So there's so many things that you can find using this interval data. You can look at your gas data on an interval basis, right? Meaning on an hourly basis. You can see that in June, you've got boilers firing, 3 out of 4 boilers firing in this building. That's not a good situation from a maintenance perspective, and it's certainly not a good situation from an energy perspective. We were able to spot that within minutes using a tool like RETScreen. There's the heat map for that. So where are those boilers? Look at the boilers firing right here. This is the summer. We can see the consumption of gas all through here. It's a problem. Those boilers had a problem with their sequencing controller, right? So you can spot that so quickly in RETScreen. And if you want to know what size heating equipment you need to doing heat pump conversion, if you can get that hourly data for natural gas, and you're starting to see that now from in a number of buildings, I can look at this curve and I can say, okay, well, 3% of the time the consumption is above 80 or 160 cubic meters per hour. I can convert cubic meters to hour to BTU per hour. I can size my heating equipment. Then I can figure out how big a heat pump I need. I don't need to guess. I can look at the data. RETScreen allows me to look at this. The low duration curve, really powerful tool. Okay, portfolio analysis. This is where we get to look at more than one building, right? So there's a very simple portfolio view. This is a sample portfolio in RETScreen, just to show you if you want to try this one yourself. I'll just go out to the main screen of RETScreen. So portfolio example right here. You just click in here and you'll get to see the same view, right? It's a sampling of multiple buildings that RETScreen has assembled. And some of them are feasibility analysis, some of them are benchmarking, some of them are benchmarking feasibility, some of them are performance. So you can bring in buildings where you've analyzed in a number of different ways into a portfolio. You can slice and dice a portfolio using the filtering tool, so you can segment it for different purposes. Some of them are transportation, buildings that are greater than 10,000 square meters, some that, Ontario. You can basically slice and dice a portfolio. Once you get deeper, this is one of my favorite graphs in RETScreen, right? And it's a benchmarking graph. In RETScreen, now this is benchmarking carbon. So you can set a benchmark. So the benchmark here, you go up here to set benchmark and target on the ribbon bar, is 0.14 tons of CO2 per square meter of building area. That's the slope of that line, right? Because this is CO2 here, this is facility size. Now, every one of these pairs is the hollow line and the solid one are a building, right? So the buildings are listed down here. They're the buildings that are in the benchmark, right, or in the portfolio right here, right? So any building that starts out above the benchmark gets red color. Any building that starts out below the benchmark gets a green color. The hollow dot is where the building ends up. The solid dot is where the building starts. So this is the base case for this building. So these are buildings where we built base and proposed case, and then we brought into a portfolio. We can look at them all in one glance to see how they're performing, see where they're at. And we can look at this over time as well. Base case, proposed case, right? So this building starts out above the line, comes close to the line at the end. Base case, proposed case. So the objective would be to bring all your buildings back down to this benchmark or your target. You can put it in as a target as well, right? I love that graph. It allows you to see everything very, very quickly. There's a custom dashboard. So in RETScreen, you can go in and you can actually create these. I talked about this earlier. So you had the standard reports that you can use. Those are pre-configured reports and very easy to PDF them. Custom dashboard. This is where you get this canvas. You can go in and custom design what you see on the screen. You can create a kiosk. There's a kiosk function in here that you could then have a computer which displays on a monitor in the lobby of your building showing the progress you're making. You can create those little progress indicators down here on the right-hand side, and they are normalized, right? So basically, you can build your own custom presentation out of all the data that's either in individual RETScreen files or in your portfolio. Very powerful tool. Now, I mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again, right? If you're using the energy planning tool in RETScreen, right, and for those that are using it, you probably know about it. For those that aren't using it, you may want to talk to Christian because it's got some really nice virtues. Well, the nice thing about it is it has a planning feature where you can go in and build your plans that are required under the municipal or or Ministry of Energy regulations in Ontario, right? You can build your plan. It has a plan builder, but it also has a place to store all your energy data and your projects as well.
That's right.
Speaking about the energy data, that's the data you need to report under EWRB here in Ontario. So you can export the data from EPT to Portfolio Manager. There's a video you can look at on LAS's website to tell you how to do that. Now, that's just the beginning. So now you fulfill the reporting requirements. Now, let's get really going at it. Let's take the data in Portfolio Manager now and bring it into RETScreen and analyze it, right? Because I can take a portfolio of buildings, could be 30 buildings, right, into RETScreen from Portfolio Manager in a couple of clicks, right? On the front screen of RETScreen, there's a place to export your entire portfolio. The first time I did this, it was 60 buildings. And I go, I'm an IT guy. I know this isn't going to work. It's going to hiccup. It's going to crash. It worked. 60 buildings, took an hour or two to do it. I can't remember exactly how long, but I walked away, had a coffee, went and did something else. It worked. It brought the buildings in. And if it finds a hiccup, Adam, you've done this on a number of buildings too, it'll actually tell you the line to go and look in the file and what to fix, right? So I was impressed. I mean, I wrote software before, and I was impressed by its ability to bring in data from other sources. So Portfolio Manager is where you're reporting as a municipality. Why don't you bring it into RETScreen and then do your own reporting? Because I can literally, after I brought the portfolio into RETScreen, it takes me about 4 clicks, without an exaggeration, 4 clicks to get this graph where I can compare the fuel consumption in kilowatt hours per square foot over time for 3 buildings. That's just a 3-building portfolio is one we use in some of our training. But it's that easy to get the data in here. And that's the key, right? Is like a lot of times the stumbling block in a lot of this stuff is just not being able to get to the data easily, right? And actually, Adam will tell you that he spends more time assembling and cleaning up data than he does actually sort of working with it, meaningfully within the analytic tools. Now, the beauty of this is that you're going to have to collect that data. You're going to do it in EPT or some other way. You're going to get it into Portfolio Manager, whether it be from EPT or something else. Portfolio Manager has data cleanup tools. Most of the data coming out of Portfolio Manager already has a lot of the problems eliminated. So by the time you get to RETScreen, you can then get down, pull your sleeves up, and really begin to analyze this stuff properly. All right, the net zero planner. And I don't, in this session, which is very close to our ending time here, I don't want to try to explain this whole thing. What I want you to do is I want you to go and see Kevin Burke from RETScreen on Tuesday in English, and I think yesterday or maybe the day before in French, did a webinar, an hour-and-a-half webinar where he went through this net zero planning tool, right? Which is where you begin with those archetypical buildings that I talked about before. And this is done for a selection of buildings, right? You take a selection of buildings which represent a portfolio for you. RETScreen builds you a portfolio, right? Based on the settings that you ask for. So you can actually tell it, for example, how to deal with the electrification of heating. That is, do I want to simply stick with my gas furnace, or do I want to consider the gas furnace, the boiler, an air source heat pump, maybe electric heating, and so on? So I can basically, and how much do I want to leave on gas, and how much do maybe I want to take it all over to electrification. I can set all those things, right? I can set the financial factors that are considered, right? I can set whether the electricity grid is going to get cleaner over time, right? If I have a target of 2050, right, then what's going to happen leading up to 2050 to the electricity grid in terms of the carbon, right? I can also tell it where to find, we've had a number of questions about the emission factors. I can tell it which database to use for the emission factors, right? I can tell it how to deal with photovoltaics, right? That is, what percentage of the roof area or ground mounted photovoltaics is it allowed to work with? What we're doing is we're really setting the parameters for the software to go out there and find the optimal solution for us. When it does that, it creates a portfolio, which is basically what I have in behind here, right? A number of buildings. But then it creates the plan, which is best summarized in this thing called the waterfall diagram, right? So here's my reference building, right? My reference in 2005. Here's my baseline, which is the reference brought out to 2022. And here's what I can achieve in carbon reduction through a cleaner grid, if I anticipate the grid's going to get cleaner, through traditional energy efficiency measures. That is what I can do to reduce the energy consumption of the building before I even think about the electrification. Then I've got the electrification heating, which in this particular example is actually relatively small. On-site renewables, photovoltaics, and solar walls, and domestic hot water heaters. Off-site renewables, so that's where we might purchase green electricity, if I can call it that, right? Where the electricity, we purchase the contract, the electricity comes from a more renewable source. And then carbon offsets, right? To take us down to essentially net zero. So it allows us to assemble, and these don't always come out the same. It allows us to assemble the whole suite of measures across a whole portfolio. So that's really a summary for a whole portfolio of buildings. Now, if you're going, well, that's a lot of data for me to collect to begin with on all my buildings. You don't have to do that, because using the archetypes and building a portfolio of buildings using the archetypes, you can have a look at what this might look like for 3 rinks. You know, you can specify, you know, I could put rinks in here, have 3 rinks, you could have a clinic. So you can actually go in there and build the portfolio based upon what you actually have in your municipality in terms of the number of buildings. Have a look at it, see what it looks like, play with it a little bit, right? And really just get a feel for what this is going to take. That's the key, right? I mean, a lot of folks right now just don't have a good sense of what it's going to take. This is going to help you to figure out what it's going to take. And then, as we said before, and as Kevin will reinforce in the video, go back and iteratively improve this, take it closer to your own circumstance. And actually, there was a lot of questions around that in that webinar, and Kevin did a great job of showing us how we would use the net zero planner and the archetypes to move back and actually create our own fulsome portfolio by the time we're done. So that's all I'm going to do, because that 90-minute video does way more than I can even do in the next 10 minutes if I so chose to, but I'm not going to try to jam it in. So I'm going to finish off here. I'm going to leave a few minutes for a couple more questions. But you know, I started off by telling you that RETScreen was an all-in-one project tool. I truly believe that, right? There's going to be things you can't do, but there's just a lot of things you can do. And if you're using another tool like Energy Plus, right? It's an hourly simulator. You can actually take the results of your other tools and bring them in here to RETScreen as well. I'm not going to go there right now, but you can import those in. You can make them, and then you can merge them into your projects and into your portfolio. So RETScreen will not only provide a lot of functionality, but it will also alert where it can't deal with something. It allows you to merge the results from the tool that can deal with that into what you're doing. So again, that's all-in-one project tool, whether it takes it from a very fundamental level or whether it just receives data from other sources, one way or the other, you can bring it all together in RETScreen. And I'm going to give you a few reasons. I'm not going to read through all these, but why use RETScreen? You can read them in the slides afterwards. Simplification. It does simplify a lot of this stuff, right? You know, it's got, well, you can test drive the software and have a look at that, but it has a lot of the things we need, like the cost databases. Standardization, right? Using the right factors for things, right? Because of the databases that are all built in allows us to standardize things. I've got people, I know a couple of municipalities that actually look for, when they go to quotations and when they look to consultants or vendors, they ask them to submit a RETScreen model along with it. That's standardization to make sure they can compare one bid or one proposal to another one. If you've got, one person using this tool and one person using that, how do you compare those things? What's the basis for comparison? Standardization allows us to make good decisions, and the standardization also comes from using the rich databases that are available for emissions and costs and all those different things in RETScreen. Persuasion. You've seen some of the charts on the screen. There's the progress indicators for the custom dashboard. It has lots of tools for persuasion. They could be charts, the indisputable visual results, the QSUM. It could be a report, right? It could be the dashboard, or maybe it's simply doing a good, solid financial analysis and showing the net PV, the IRR, the benefit to cost, or what I call the savings to investment ratio. All of those things could be persuasive, and they could all be assembled and presented quite nicely, quite attractively from within RETScreen. Interoperability, the ability to get data from different sources. I talked a little bit about the portfolio manager interface. I talked about the Hydro interface, but RETScreen has that ability to interchange data. I mean, you can also push data the other direction, but it's more about bringing the data into RETScreen, but it doesn't trap your data either. You can get it out. I know that's always a concern for some people. Your data's not trapped with RETScreen, but if RETScreen does their job, you'll want to leave your data in RETScreen in the long run, quite frankly. And if that's not enough, the 30-day license. Give it a go. Let us know what you think. If you need help, and we're here to do that. I mean, part of our commitment to do the session today is to field questions, not just within the session, which thank you for the questions we've had, but also after the session, allowing us to sort of maybe more meaningfully think about your questions, respond to them. I might even say, hey, I'm going to pick somebody's name online. Hey, Brent, you had a great question. can we set up a little Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting where I can kind of walk you through the software with that? Or maybe you'll open the software, I'll tell you what to do, and you'll learn how to do it yourself. And that's really my goal in all this. I don't want to do your analysis for you. I want to inspire you. I want to help you to understand how to do it. And I want to have you going out there and doing this yourself and making your organizations more sustainable through energy efficiency with RETScreen. Christian, over to you.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. That was a great rundown of this amazing, software and what it can do. Like I said, this is just a 1.5 hour version, and we kind of really cruise through it. I've put in the chat, and I'll encourage you to get in touch with me. If you want a training, we can arrange that. If you're a public sector organization in Ontario, a municipality in Ontario, and if we want a training in RETScreen, Stephen or Adam can be on site, to do that with you at a cost, but that cost is eligible for IESO incentives. That's if you live in Ontario. Certainly, 1.5 hour is a marathon to get to the end. And not a marathon, it's a sprint, rather. It's a sprint. Yeah.
Yeah, Faisal asked one more question. We do have a minute. Faisal, you asked the question, can you please show one more time importing portfolio manager data? So that's on slide 48. So there we go, 48. So basically you go to the home screen and you click on the portfolio or the portfolio button. I'll show you how to do that actually within RETScreen. The key thing is when you go to portfolio manager, on the bottom left-hand side, there's a thing that says export your whole portfolio. That's the first thing you got to do. You'll get a file. It's that file that you need. And then when you go into RETScreen, you go down here to My Portfolio, and you can basically build your portfolio from Portfolio Manager. Once you click on that, then it's going to ask you, where's the data source? Are you creating a new portfolio or you're updating one? We work with a number of organizations that do this on a monthly basis. They bring the data into Portfolio Manager, they report for the purposes from Portfolio Manager, then they roll the data into RETScreen, and they keep going. So you can do an update or a new portfolio to begin with. So, and there's some of the other connector sources that they've added in this latest version 9.1. Very cool. I mean, and I'm sure the list will increase. And you can download RETScreen right now, even before you get the license. You can play with it. There's a few things that you won't be able to use. There's a lot you can use, and then you get to 30 days, you can do everything, and then you can make a decision after that. And one thing I will mention is that if you want to buy the subscription, it's not just one user, it's 10 users. Okay, so you can share amongst your organization. It could be across sites in the same company. So it's pretty flexible. 10 users, it's a pretty good deal if you've got a number of users. Now, obviously, if you're a small municipality, that's going to be a little more difficult. But for larger organizations, it may be easier. Christian.
Right. Are there training videos that take a deeper dive into managing demand delta via RETScreen? Sure, there are training. I think you showed us some of the training videos, and they are all over on the software. So yeah. And like Stephen said, he speaks in some of the videos as well. So yes, they are. To answer your question, they are.
In some of the videos, my voice is a little slower. Yeah, if you go to the front screen on RETScreen, if you want to get to the videos, the simplest way, just download the version today, even without the license, and you can go over to the e-learning here. If you click on e-learning, it's going to take you to RETScreen's e-learning channel, just like that. And you can look at the videos. Again, like we talked about, all the links are, there we go. And there's the video there, Net Zero Planning. That's the one that Kevin did on Tuesday. Great job, Kevin. But there's many other ones too. There's a whole series of them. Some of these are the ones that are embedded. So you can get to them via the embedded links, like within context of the software. There's just a ton of stuff here. Like you can probably sit here for the next, maybe 2 months just watching videos on RETScreen if you so choose.
Okay. So, wow, thank you so much. Please get in touch with us. You have our details, Stephen or myself, and let's take the conversation, one more step ahead. This was just an intro, in a 1.5 webinar, 1.5 hours webinar. Like I said, yeah, if we take it one day or a half day, it will do you much good. So please, let's see how much we can work together and help you in this regard. Yeah. It's wonderful too.
There was a question about French videos. Some of the webinars, some of them, the recorded ones, are in French. I think the one on the Net Zero Planner is in French because it was delivered in French, so that probably should be up on the website. Just check back to they loaded the Net Zero Planning one up within 2 days. So the ones that we're doing are in English. Unfortunately, I'm in English, but if you have a specific thing that you're interested in the video, I work with Michel Perron, who does a lot of stuff with me, and he's done some of the French videos. So there is certainly French videos in almost every case on the website. Some of the webinars may only be in one language. So
thank you, Stephen, once again. Thank you, Adam, for taking all the questions as well, helping us answer them. And thank every panelist that joined us also, every attendee that joined us this morning. Thank you. Have a great day.
thank you all.